or many lawyers, the interest in meditation is precipitated by concern about experiencing a lot of stress, which many lawyers do. This meditative practice, and by the way, this is only one of many, many forms of meditation, the one I teach, mindfulness. But in this particular practice, you begin by learning to concentrate on the breath, and then to concentrate on sensations in the body, and then to thoughts and emotions, and then to what's called non-judgmental awareness, in which you're open to everything. But the experience of beginning to focus on anything, something like the breath, for example, brings about, in most of us, a calmness. And so it's not that we don't have stress anymore. It's that we respond in a different way to the stress. So what we're trying to do, actually, is learn to observe the symptoms of stress without judgment, and then they weaken. So, for example, we would be learning to notice when there's a lot of tension in the body, to notice when we're breathing really fast. And by bringing attention to these things, we reduce, they lose some strength, and so we have the experience of more calm. Now, this doesn't always work, of course, because sometimes the experience is too strong for us to handle. But the more we practice in meditation, and the more we try bringing this into our daily lives, the better, or the more likely, or the more often we're able to handle stress better. So there are very refined programs that are built around using meditation to address stress. But by addressing stress, often a person is also able to understand themselves better and to understand other people better, because we get the real sense through meditating that most of us have minds that work more or less the same way. In other words, we're all distracted. We all have thoughts coming as if from unknown places that could take over our minds. It seems that way anyway. And that everyone has a lot of mental suffering going on, even people who appear to have everything under control. And once we realize that everyone's suffering, it becomes easier to have kindly feelings toward other people and toward ourselves. And so the meditation can help soften a sense of self and make us understand other people better, and maybe sometimes treat other people better. If a lawyer who was interested in meditation asked me what to do, I would say there are several ways to get into it, and just give some. For example, there's lots of terrific books to read. There are workshops specifically designed for lawyers, but there also is all kinds of meditation training available in virtually any medium or large-sized city in the United States. You can find resources through Google. There are programs called mindfulness-based stress reduction. There are other programs that go by the name of mindfulness meditation or insight meditation. Some of the Zen programs will provide this kind of training. Also, there are, in most even medium-sized cities, there are informal, semi-organized or even organized groups that will meet regularly, maybe once a week, and sit together. I think it's very good to sit with a group of people. Often the experience is much stronger, and it's helpful to have the support. So there's a lot to read, and if a person gets more interested, there also are long there are retreats of various lengths, from half a day all the way up to several months. I don't suggest the several months for a beginner, but half a day might be a nice way to start, or a full day. it would be helpful to find people in one's community who are involved in meditation, and find a group or an individual with whom you feel comfortable. Mindfulness is in many ways the opposite of a lot of what lawyers do with their minds generally, which is thinking. Mindfulness, as I'm using the term, is not really thinking, it's observing. And it's observing without judgment. So it's in some ways strongly countercultural, because one of the things that lawyers do all the time is make judgments about almost everything. And what we're trying to cultivate is the ability to observe and to let the judgments go, so that we can see more, and so that we can feel more connected with what's going on. So for many lawyers, the idea of observing without judgment doesn't make any sense. But what we're talking about is not that we would stop making judgments, but we would have a different relationship to the judgments. In other words, if you decide you don't like a particular client of yours, to simply notice that that's a thought, and you might want to continue to work with the client anyway, just to let that go. In other words, we're trying to have some freedom from our habitual assumptions and the judgments that we make. One of the sayings in this business is, don't believe everything you think. Because once you start paying attention to the thoughts that run through your mind, you'll notice that a lot of them don't make any sense, and a lot of them you don't agree with, and a lot of them you'd never want anyone to know that you have. And so we're looking to develop a sort of freedom from the thinking mind. Now, the paradox is, of course, that once we do this, it becomes easier to think clearly. So they really go together. In some ways, this is resting the mind. And in fact, one lawyer I know tells me that sometimes he'll be meditating just before he starts to write a brief, and that the brief will come into his mind complete and just right, even though he's not trying to do that. He's not deliberately thinking about the brief, but somehow the mind at rest sometimes will do some work. So what we're trying to do is, in one way, introduce some balance into the way we work with our minds, a balance between thinking and observing, between working and resting. So the risky part of going to law school, it seems to me, is getting trapped by the certain way that a certain way of thinking that predominates in legal education. One can easily get trapped by that, because that way of thinking involves looking for solutions to problems in rules of law, and the rules of law make only certain kinds of facts relevant, and they exclude emotions and to some extent include human values. So it's easy to get trapped into that line of thinking. There's so many different things one can do with a legal education. It can be a great benefit. It teaches a very powerful way of thinking, but it's so powerful that it can easily take over, and one can lose common sense if you are totally caught up in legal thinking. So I would encourage someone who is thinking of going to law school to learn as much as he or she could about law school first. Go to classes, read some books about law school, talk to lawyers, talk to law students, and remember, if you go to law school, that to hold on to your own values.